All right, welcome to part 16 of my overview of the Bible story. We're continuing the story of David, and I have a question for you. So far in the story, how has Israel achieved victory? Just think back about this whole story of Israel. How have they achieved victory? Is it because they're really good fighters? Is it because they have better weapons, maybe? What is the reason? Well, the only reason is that Yahweh himself has given them victory. It's been a miracle. Remember this group of children going through the desert and all their parents died? And you got a whole bunch of kids, and they grow up, and then they take the land under Joshua's leadership. Were they trained fighters? No, they weren't trained fighters. They didn't have great weapons. It was God himself who gave them victory. Look what it says in Psalm 44, verse 3. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, God. It was your arm and the light of your face, for you loved them. Oh, isn't that beautiful? It's just the love of God. God loves this little group of people that were slaves in Egypt. He saved them out of slavery. Now they have their own land, and now under David's kingship, they have peace. Now all the enemies are basically conquered all around. They have peace right now. So it's only God. It's only God. It's not Israel can't say we're great fighters. It's our own strength. Remember the story of Gideon that we looked at a few lessons ago? Okay, what did God say to Gideon? The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men." Remember, God had told Gideon, "I'm choosing you, Gideon, to go save Israel from the Midianites." And so Gideon went and got a whole army together, I think over 20,000 soldiers. And then God said, "That's too many, Gideon. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." We don't need you, God. Our own strength has saved us. So what did God say? I'm just going to choose 300. With 300 men, Gideon, I'm going to use your little army of 300 men and beat that massive, huge group of Midianites. It said their camels were more than the sand on the seashore. It doesn't say how many there were, but just a huge, massive number of probably trained fighters, good, strong army. 300 men. Okay, now keep this idea in mind when we talk about David's next sin. Remember, his first big sin was against it was against Bathsheba. It was against her husband. It was against God. It was bad. Okay, it was really bad. But now we're talking about another sin that David did. So look at this, okay? David said to Joab, remember Joab is the general of Israel's army, okay? David said to Joab and the commanders of the troops, "Go and count the Israelites from Beersheba to Dan." Okay, Beersheba is in the south of Israel, and Dan is all the way in the north. So what this is saying, David's saying, go and do a census, count up all our people from all the way down to all the way up here, the whole country. Go and count them. Then report back to me so that I may know how many there are. But Joab replied, "May Yahweh multiply his troops 100 times over. my lord, the king, are they not all my lord's subjects? He's calling David his lord. David's the master, right? David's the ruler, king of Israel. So people call the king my lord, right? My lord, you're the ruler of all the people. Well, why do you want to count him here? Why does my lord want to do this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel? So Joab is kind of politely trying to change David's mind. And he's saying if David does this, it's going to bring guilt on Israel. Why? What's the reason? Why is David wanting to do this? There's really only one reason. It's pride, right? I mean, why would he want to be doing this? He probably wants just to know, how many people do I have in my kingdom? Or maybe he wanted to go to war with some distant country. Maybe he wanted to know, how many fighting men? What's the size of my army, Joab? I want to know how many people we can... Maybe he was thinking about going to war with Greece or Egypt or India or something. I don't know. We don't know. But we know it's probably because of his pride, right? So what do you think? Is David going to listen to Joab's advice? The king's word, however, overruled Joab. David didn't listen to Joab. So Joab left and went throughout Israel and then came back to Jerusalem. Joab reported the number of the fighting men to David. In all Israel, there were 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword, including 470,000 in Judah. Okay, so Joab gets back from his trip. This is King David. This is how many fighting troops we have. 1.1 million in Israel and 470,000 in Judah. Now, why does he break that number up like that into two different numbers? Isn't the whole country Israel? Why is he talking about Judah as its own country almost? Well, remember back when King Saul was alive? Okay, King Saul's basically throne, he was ruling from up here north of Jerusalem. Okay, and David never fought against Saul directly. Remember, David refused to do that. Why? Because he always said, Saul is God's Messiah. He was anointed by Samuel, just like David was anointed, right? So David refused to fight him. But after Saul died, the kingdom of Saul was at war with where David was basically in Judah here. Okay, so in this period of time, we kind of start seeing two things. We see this area kind of being called Judah because that's where the tribe of Judah was allotted. Remember when Joshua, they came across here? Remember the other good guy, the other good spy? What was his name? Caleb. Okay, so after they conquer the whole land, remember Caleb goes to Joshua and says, as my inheritance, as my portion, okay, my tribe, the tribe of Judah, I want this area here. Okay, so then he's down here. He gets this area. So that's why this is the tribe of Judah. Okay, and the other tribes, for example, Dan is a tribe up here. Okay, you could look at a map of the tribes of Israel. Okay, but anyway, this is going to be called Israel, this north part, and now from now on in the story, well, at least for the next few episodes, it's kind of important to understand this. This southern part is going to be called Judah, and this northern part is going to be called Israel. Okay, so Israel's bigger than Judah. That's why there are 1.1 million fighting men here and only 470,000 here. Okay, so together, I mean, there's like more than 1.5 million fighting men. That's a lot. Even in today's standards, that's a lot. Man, that is a lot. Okay, so what happens next in the story? Well, God punishes Israel for David's sin. And David realizes his sin and he repents. David said to God, I have sinned greatly because I've done this thing. Now please take away your servant's guilt, for I've been very foolish. Okay, so David is asking God for forgiveness. He's repenting. So what's God going to do? What do you think? This is what happens next. Then the Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer. Okay, the word seer, a seer is like a prophet. Okay, remember when David sinned with Bathsheba? God didn't go to David directly and say, you're a sinner. Remember? He sent Nathan the prophet, and Nathan told David that story about the rich man and the poor man and the sheep. And then Nathan said, you are the man. Okay, so we kind of get the feeling here that God is going to use a prophet to talk to the kings. Okay, that's just the way God's going to do it. That's his choice, right? So the Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer. This was the message. Go and say to David, this is what the Lord says. I will give you 3 choices. Choose one of these punishments, and I will inflict it on you. So Gad came to David and said, these are the choices the Lord has given you. You may choose 3 years of famine, 3 months of destruction by the sword of your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague as the angel of the Lord brings devastation throughout the land of Israel. Decide what answer I should give the Lord who sent me. Oh boy. So God is giving David 3 options here. Okay, what are the 3 options? 3 years of famine, 3 months of war, destruction by your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague. Which would you choose? Man, that's a tough choice. So David says, I'm in a desperate situation, David replied to Gad, but let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great. Do not let me fall into human hands. Okay, so David is rejecting the 3 months of war. Look what he says, okay? These are the choices, where am I? These are the choices the Lord has given you. You may choose 3 years of famine, okay, 3 months of destruction, or the sword of your enemies, okay? Or 3 days of severe plague as the angel of the Lord brings devastation. That's how Gad worded it. Or that's the message God told Gad to tell David. Okay? So David is paying attention to the words here. And look at this, the angel of the Lord. David knows that the angel of the Lord is God himself. Or at least there's some link between God and the angel of the Lord. Remember when the angel of the Lord went throughout Egypt and killed all the firstborn of Egypt, except those who had the blood on the door, the Israelites who had the blood of the lamb on their door? Then the angel of the Lord passed over them. So in the story so far, we kind of have this mysterious figure called the angel of the Lord. Like in the story of Gideon, we talked about this too, right? Where it's almost like the angel of the Lord is Yahweh, or there's some link there. Okay, so David knows this. David knows that if he chooses this option, the 3 days of plague, he's dealing directly with God. But if he chooses the 3 months of destruction by the sword of his enemies, then he's dealing with his enemies. So he chooses the plague because he says, but let me fall into the hands of the Lord. for his mercy is very great. Do not let me fall into human hands. So David would rather deal directly with the Lord than with his enemies, because the enemies don't have any mercy, but the Lord, David knows the Lord is merciful. Okay, so what's going to happen, guys? So the Lord sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 people died as a result. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. Guys, the main city, the most important city in the story, the most important city in the whole world, God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But just as the angel was preparing to destroy it, the Lord relented and said to the death angel, "Stop, that's enough." At that moment, the angel of the Lord was standing by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Okay, so this angel is getting ready to destroy Jerusalem, but God says, "Stop." So the angel relented. The Lord relented and said to the angel, "Stop." Okay, so and where is this? At the threshing floor of Araunah. What's a threshing floor? A threshing floor is a place where grain is processed. Okay, so let's say you're a farmer. You have a field of wheat or barley, and you go and you harvest your wheat. Right? You get it into bundles. Then you go and you carry your bundles of wheat to the threshing floor, and that's where you want to separate the kernel of wheat from the chaff. Okay, so how are you going to do that? Well, there were different methods of doing that. Okay, let's just say, for example, you beat it, okay? You want to get the grain out. Let's say you do some beating, you beat the wheat or the barley or whatever, and it falls out. The grain, kind of the kernel, it falls out. But now everything's in a big pile like this, let's say, right? So what do you want to do? You take it and you throw it up in the air, and the wind takes the chaff away, and the kernel of wheat falls back down because it's heavier, right? So this is why threshing floors were usually on hilltops, because on the top of a hill or a mountain, right, the wind is stronger, so the wind can like better separate the chaff from the wheat or whatever kind of grain you're harvesting, right? So that's what a threshing floor is. So there was a guy named Araunah who owned this threshing floor. And that's where the angel of the Lord was when he stopped. When he was preparing to destroy Jerusalem, but then he stopped. Okay? So David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with his sword drawn, reaching out over Jerusalem. So David and the leaders of Israel put on burlap to show their deep distress and fell face down on the ground. Okay, burlap is sackcloth. It's that like itchy kind of material. Okay, they put on burlap and they just bowed down to the ground, face down to the ground. And David said to God, "I am the one who called for the census. I am the one who has sinned and done wrong. But these people are as innocent as sheep. What have they done? O Lord my God, let your anger fall against me and my family, but do not destroy your people." All right, so here David is taking full ownership of his sin. And he's being like, "God, look, all these people are just innocent sheep. I'm the guilty one. Let your wrath come upon me." So, what do you think is going to happen? Then the angel of the Lord told Gad to instruct David to go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up to do what the Lord had commanded him through Gad. Araunah, who was busy threshing wheat at the time, turned and saw the angel there. His 4 sons who were with him ran away and hid. When Araunah saw David approaching, he left his threshing floor and bowed before David with his face to the ground. Right, David's the king, right? Everybody bows down to David. He's the top dog, right? So Araunah sees David coming and he goes and he bows down before him. And then David said to Araunah, "Let me buy this threshing floor from you at its full price. Then I will build an altar to the Lord there, so that he will stop the plague." "Take it, my lord the king, and use it as you wish," Araunah said to David. "I will give the oxen for the burnt offerings, and the threshing boards for wood to build a fire on the altar, and the wheat for the grain offering. I will give it all to you." So Araunah is saying, you don't have to buy it, King David. Just take it. It's yours. Have it all. Now, these kind of offerings, burnt offerings and grain offerings. Now, we didn't really talk about this, but if you go back and look at the book of Leviticus, remember all the rules. We didn't talk about all the rules, but there were a lot of different kinds of offerings. Anyway, if you want to go back and read the Bible, the full story so far, that would be great, actually. But it's kind of, I don't know, most people get pretty bored when at that point when it's talking about all the different kinds of offerings and stuff like that. Burnt offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, grain, all these kind of offerings. But anyway, just so you know, the Bible talks about it. Okay. So Araunah is saying, take it. What's David going to say? David says, but King David replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on buying it for the full price. I will not take what is yours and give it to the Lord. I will not present burnt offerings that have cost me nothing." So David gave Araunah 600 pieces of gold in payment for the threshing floor. David built an altar there to the Lord and sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. And when David prayed, the Lord answered him by sending fire from heaven to burn up the offering on the altar. Then the Lord spoke to the angel who put the sword back into its sheath. Okay, remember, just like in the story of Gideon, I think we talked about this, right? Where Gideon went to get make like an offering to the Lord, and then remember the angel of the Lord touched the offering with the tip of his staff, and it burned up. Okay, so the same thing is kind of happening here, right? The Lord answered him by sending fire from heaven to burn up the offering on the altar. Okay, so then the Lord speaks to the angel who puts the sword back in its sheath. So now there's going to be no destruction of Jerusalem because of this offering. Okay, so interesting. Now, where is this threshing floor? Where do you think it is? Right, David sees an angel between heaven and earth, sword drawn, ready to annihilate Jerusalem. Where do you think it is? Right here, guys. It's right here. Remember when we talked about David's palace? So David, there's a little area called the City of David. You can go see it today if you want. You can see the ruins of David's palace. Okay, so the City of David is just right down here, just south of this area, the Temple Mount. Okay, it's just over here. So David looks up here, right? I mean, it didn't look like this 3,000 years ago. This is modern Jerusalem here. So the angel was somewhere over here with the sword, and this was Araunah's threshing floor. Okay, so all this stuff happened right here. Now, you remember, this is Mount Moriah, right? This is where Abraham and Isaac were. And also, this is the area where Melchizedek lived. Remember that mysterious king priest of Jerusalem named Melchizedek? So this is really interesting, right? This was Araunah's threshing floor, and the angel was here, and David built an altar here to he was obeying God, to stop the destruction of Jerusalem. Right here. Man. So we're getting the feeling that this little hill here, it's not super small. It's actually, if you walk around here, it's pretty big, but it's not that big. It's about, maybe about like 30 to 40 football fields big. So it's just kind of it's an area anyway. Wow. This is going to be really important moving forward in the story, right? Now, David says something very important right now. What do you think he's going to say next? He says this. Then David said, "This will be the location for the temple of the Lord God and the place of the altar for Israel's burnt offerings." Man, remember David wanted to build God a house? So why is God living in a tent and I am living in a nice palace? How can that be? So David wanted to build a temple for God, but what did God say to David? He said, nope, you're not going to be the one to build me a temple. It's going to be your son who's going to build me a temple. But David, I'm going to establish your family as like a house, and the king, all the future kings of Jerusalem are going to come from your family, like your offspring. Whoa. So now we know the place. It's going to be right there on that hill where the temple is going to be built. This is a huge development in the story. Because remember, so far God has been living in a tent. And now we're going to see the temple being built, right? So now I just want to talk about 2 Psalms. Okay, we already talked a bit about the book of Psalms. There are 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms. We already looked at a couple of them. But now I want to take a look at 2 very important Psalms as it relates to what we're talking about here, this hill. Okay, so one is Psalm 2, and the other is Psalm 110. Let's start with Psalm 110. Okay, Yahweh said to my master. Okay, so David is writing this, and David says this. Yahweh said to my master, "Sit in the place of honor at my right hand, until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet." This is the first verse, not the whole psalm, but I just want to stop and ask you what's going on here. Look what David is saying. Yahweh said to my master. Who is David's master? David is the master. David's the king of Israel. Who is higher than him? Nobody. He's the master. He's the king. So who is he talking about here? Who is David's master? Yahweh said to my master. Just think about that. Okay, just keep that in your mind. Let's keep going in the psalm. The Lord will extend your powerful kingdom from Jerusalem. You will rule over your enemies. When you go to war, your people will serve you willingly. You are arrayed in holy garments, and your strength will be renewed each day like the morning dew. Interesting. So who's he talking about? Who's you in this passage? Kind of mysterious, right? The Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. Whoa. God's making a promise here. Well, what's that going to be? You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Whoa, what is this? God's making a promise. You, who's you? Well, this is David's master, right? This mysterious master of David. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Well, the priest, there was a priest at that time, a priest in the order of Aaron, right? The order of just means kind of like, in the line of. Remember Aaron was the first high priest, and then his sons, that kind of passed on like that. That was the house of Aaron, or the order of Aaron. But now God is saying, wait, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek was before Aaron, 400 years or so before Aaron. So this is so interesting because at the time of David, well, there was a priest from Aaron. That priest at that time was named Zadok, a good guy, a good priest. So what's going on here? This is mysterious, right? We have another mention of this mysterious character named Melchizedek. So we kind of get the feeling, okay, that David's master is the king of Jerusalem and a priest in the order of Melchizedek. But David himself is the king of Jerusalem. So who is David's master? At this point, we don't really know. It's just a mystery, right? So let's continue the psalm. The Lord stands at your right hand to protect you. He will strike down many kings when his anger erupts. He will punish the nations and fill their land with corpses. He will shatter heads over the whole earth. But he himself will be refreshed from the brooks along the way. He will be victorious. What's going on here? It sounds like he's pretty angry. He will strike down many kings when his anger erupts. Whoa, it kind of sounds like a volcano. Anger's building, then suddenly, bam, it just erupts. Okay, so it's pretty, this sounds pretty serious. He will fill their lands with corpses. All the countries in the world, dead bodies. He's going to fill those countries with dead bodies. Man, that sounds pretty violent. Okay. Now let's talk about Psalm 2. All right, that was the end. That's the whole Psalm 110. We're done with Psalm 110. Let's talk about Psalm 2. Why do the nations rage? We still recording? We're still recording. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his Messiah. Okay, so all the rulers of the world are getting together. They're angry. They're meeting together, maybe at the United Nations. They're all meeting together. We don't like Yahweh, and we don't like his Messiah. So David is saying, these people, these kings of the earth, they're getting ready. They're against Yahweh and against his Messiah. What does this mean? Because David is the Messiah, right? David is the anointed one of Israel. So we kind of get this feeling that he's not talking about himself here, because the whole kings, he was at peace. I mean, the kings of the world weren't there, weren't trying to kill him at this point. He wasn't going off and fighting and filling the other countries with corpses, like Psalm 110 says. So what's going on here? We kind of get the feeling that this Messiah is going to be a future Messiah. But remember, all the future Messiahs are going to come from David's own body, one of his sons, right? Someone in his line, right? So we get the feeling here that David's master is actually his son. Okay? David's master is going to be the future son that comes from his body. Either one generation or two generations or however many generations down, that's going to be the special son who is his master. So how does that work? Well, let's keep reading, okay? So the kings set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his Messiah, saying, what are they saying? What do you think they're going to say to each other? They say, we will not accept their authority over us. We will get free from their power. We're not going to accept Yahweh's authority over us and his Messiah, his anointed one. No. We're going to go to war here. We're going to get free from under their authority. We don't want their authority. Get away from me, Yahweh. We have our own countries. We want our own independence. Okay, so what's God going to respond? How is he going to respond? It says, the one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Okay, remember, the kings of the earth are setting themselves against Yahweh, and Yahweh in heaven, he laughs. He scoffs at them, and he says, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. You guys can set yourselves whatever you want against us, but me, what I'm doing is I've set my king on Zion, my holy hill. Where is that? It's the picture we just saw. The threshing floor of Araunah, Mount Moriah, right? Where Melchizedek was. Now we kind of are getting some clues here for this story, right? So God is saying, this is what's going to happen. You guys are setting yourselves. Well, I am also setting my king on Zion. So then what's it going to say? So then it says this. It says, I will tell of the decree. Yahweh said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like pottery. What's going on here, guys? So Yahweh is saying, you are my son. Okay, he's saying, for me, I've set my king on Zion, my holy hill. Now, who's that king? Now, Yahweh is saying, that's my son. You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them. Sounds pretty violent. You'll break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like pottery. So this king, who's Yahweh's son, is going to break the nations. He's going to break the nations of the whole world. He's going to rule them with a rod of iron. Okay? The ends of the earth will be this son's possession. The whole earth is going to be his possession. This is sounding a lot like what Israel said about his fourth son, Judah, right? He said the scepter. What is a scepter? It's basically a rod of iron. It's a weapon, but it's decorated with, gold or precious jewels or whatever. Okay? He said the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. So now we kind of get the feeling how the nations are going to obey that king. It's going to be because the king is going to break those countries with his rod of iron. He's going to rule them with an iron fist and fill their countries, seems like fill their countries with dead bodies. So there's going to be fighting here. Whoa. This is interesting stuff, guys, right? And we're kind of left with some questions. How is this going to happen? Okay. Now look at this. You are my son. Today I have begotten you. What does this word mean, begotten? Does it mean that God made a son. Oh, today you're born, son. In our, especially the English language today, people say, hey, let's make a kid. Let's make a baby. Okay, so it kind of seems like the baby had a beginning. But actually, that's the wrong way to think about this. Really, a baby it's in the father's body already, right? The baby comes through the father, and it didn't have a starting point. It was always already existing as part of the father, right? That's why a father and a son are one, right? There wasn't no beginning of the son. In our modern English, for example, if I would say, I am the son of my great-grandpa, would that be correct? No, that would be weird. People would say, no, you're not the son of your great-grandpa. But in other cultures and other languages, they don't make any distinction between this. It would be totally fine to say, I'm the son of my great-grandpa, right? Because I came out of his body. Right? This generation, that generation, it's all one. Okay, so I'm the son of my ancestors way a long time ago. I can say that. In other countries and other languages don't have this problem that English has. And our culture is totally wrong about this. Okay, do you know what Russian dolls are? It's kind of like this idea where, what's the word? What's the name? I think in... I forgot the name. There's a name for these dolls in Russian, I think in the Russian language. But I think people just call them Russian dolls. Okay, so the idea is that inside this one is this one, and inside this one is this one, inside this one is this one. So it's just one, it's one doll, but actually it's many inside that doll. Okay, so it's kind of like that idea where all of these dolls are inside that one. So these dolls aren't separate. In a way they're separate, but in a way they're in the body of that one. Right? So if you just think about it that way, when God is saying this, you are my son, today I have begotten you, it doesn't mean I made you today. It means you always existed in me, and today you're kind of being revealed. Like when a son is born, or when a baby is born, it's almost like the baby is revealed to the world. The baby doesn't really have a starting point, right? So it's kind of a mysterious thing, right? But anyway, we get the feeling in this psalm and in these stories so far, right? The story of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all this stuff. We get the feeling that Yahweh's son is going to end up being Abraham's son and Israel's son and David's son. Okay? So the son of David is the son of Israel, is the son of Abraham, is the son of Yahweh himself. Okay, that's kind of the feeling we get, right? Son, 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 all one. Or another way we could say it is the son of all God's promises. Remember, God's made some promises so far. He made a promise to Abraham, right, that the whole world would be blessed in his family. Okay, and to David, he made another promise. He said, David, I'm going to establish your kingdom forever here, okay? So the one who's going to rule the whole world is going to come from you, David. Whoa. So, man, that's, wow, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? Now let's just finish Psalm 2. What's it going to say now? Now, therefore, O kings, be wise. You remember the kings are taking counsel together against Yahweh and against his Messiah? So it says, now, therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. For his wrath is quickly kindled. Remember what it said in Psalm 110? His anger might erupt here very suddenly, Well, look at this. His wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Wow. So the only way to get away from this wrath that's coming very quickly is to take refuge in who? In the Son. Wow. So we're kind of getting the feeling that when God's Son enters the picture, I mean, at this point in the story, we don't really know who that Son is yet. David is talking about him in some mysterious way. We know it's going to be the Son of David, but we don't know who he's going to be yet. But we know that when he comes, we better treat him really well, okay? When we find out who Yahweh's Son is, we better treat him like gold. We better treat him better than gold, better than anything else, better than anyone else. We better treat him like the most important thing ever. Okay? That's the picture we're getting here in this story about the Son who's going to reign from God's holy mountain, the threshing floor of Araunah or Mount Moriah. And this mysterious Son is somehow going to be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now, were Aaron's priests, were his descendants priests forever? No, Aaron died, right? What about his sons? They all died. And their sons, they died. Well, this Son is going to reign forever in the order of Melchizedek. Weird. Now, I want to ask you a question. When this Son shows up to that place, to that holy hill, do you think Israel will treat him well? What do you think is going to happen? What's your prediction? When this Son finally shows up in the story, do you think Israel, this nation of Israel, do you think they'll treat him well? Think about this when you go to bed tonight. Just wonder, make a prediction, okay? Make a prediction about how this is going to go. What's going to happen when God's own Son comes to Jerusalem? Oh, man, this is going to get interesting, guys. It's going to get very interesting. But anyway, that's the end of this part. Okay, now you know how important this hill really is. Araunah's threshing floor. The angel of the Lord, remember, getting ready to slaughter, but then David builds the altar there. He obeys God's instruction, builds an altar right there, the same place where Abraham built that altar. This is getting interesting, guys. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for following this story. As you can see, I'm pretty excited about this story. Hope you are too. As always, I love you so much. God bless you today. And I hope you're doing great. And I'll see you over in the next episode of Mark's Bible Overview. Take care.